Ultimately, your success is determined by your factors and what programs are out there. And it's not a one size fits all approach anymore, unfortunately. So it's not that easy because, in the context of constant policy changes, the constant craziness of the immigration industry right now, what you need is a backup plan. And what your backup plan needs is a backup plan.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we are talking about how to become permanent residents in Canada. So there are flagship federal programs like Express Entry, probably very popular, but there are other programs that are not the first choice, right? But some people should make it their first choice to become permanent residents in Canada. Today we're talking about French immigration programs, provincial nominee programs, and Atlantic immigration programs. And of course, we are joined by our trusted immigration lawyer who helps Bea and I become permanent residents in under 2 years. And of course, we are now Canadian citizens because of his help. Welcome back to the channel, attorney Lou Dangzalan. Lou, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Daniel.
Thanks, Lou. Lou, we're gonna get right into it. I have rapid fire questions here. We will get started. So first, we're gonna be talking about French immigration programs. Lou, how does knowing French improve my chances of immigrating to Canada?
Well, first of all, you talked about Express Entry as this big federal program that exists out there as a mainstream for, becoming permanent resident in Canada. And how does French help you in that regard is that you get awarded extra points for bilingualism if you're in the pool. Not only that, as a lot of people already know, beyond the usual general draws, there are also category-based draws. And one of the categories put forward by the government is what's called the Francophone draw for categories, basically, that if you have a certain level of French, CLB 7 out of 10, so 7 out of 10 in French, then you would benefit from being in that category, and you have higher chances of getting selected and receiving an invitation to apply, despite the persistently high cutoff scores for general draws. So, really, the technique for express entry these days is to basically belong to one of the categories, and this is one way to do it. And for those who are kind of like on the fence about learning French, we have several clients that we've been assisting, and some of them have taken it as an option and as their primary means of becoming a permanent resident. We have one client, for example, who's been working on his French, and he scored CLB 7 except for one category. So he's just giving himself another 2 more months to work on his written French. And he should be able to redo his test and he should make it for the next few Francophone draws. But not only that, there's a bonus to this, Daniel, because if you have, CLB 5 for French, as the current French programs stand right now, what's interesting is that foreign nationals who normally require an LMIA to apply for a work permit to come to Canada, not necessarily as permanent residents, but as temporary foreign workers, for example. If you have French at CLB 5, so that's actually lower than what you need for express entry. If you have CLB 5 in French, you're able to apply for a work permit without the support of a labor market impact assessment. The employer just needs to endorse your application, put forward their job offer to you, pay the administrative fees for the exemption, which is $230 versus the $1,000 that they need to pay for a full LMIA, and you get yourself an employer-specific work permit, and that's basically exempt from an LMIA. So yeah, so those are things that could open up. So one scenario that this could be useful, for example, is if you're running out of leg room in your PGWP, you're running out of luck, but you still have maybe a year and a half left, it's not a bad idea to actually put French as one of the things that you need to achieve in the next 12 months. Because if you do get to that certain level, which is 5 out of 10, lower than the express entry requirement, then basically you get to apply for a new work permit, right? Because your PGWP will expire. It cannot be renewed ever. But if you can switch to a Francophone mobility work permit, that gives you some time. Usually, those work permits are valid for 2 more years, and you can keep improving your French, and then you can slot yourself into the Francophone draws for, express entry.
Interesting. So I've been seeing posts online, even some of my friends are like, well, I guess I just have to learn French. Ha ha ha, laughing emoji. Apparently it's really the way to go. So from what I'm hearing from you, like how I'm curious. I know you've learned French, but how can someone who doesn't even know the language, how can someone improve their French skills just to qualify more for this immigration pathway?
Right. It's not impossible. I mean, I'm a testament to that. I picked up French in 2 years, for example, from zero. I had zero French skills. And I ended up in a French delivered program at the University of Ottawa. I went to the University of Ottawa for law school, and my program was largely delivered in French. So, yeah, it's not impossible. And as I said, we have a client who basically learned French from scratch as well. And in 1 year's time, he was able to advance from CLB 0 to basically CLB 7, practically there, right? Except for one category. The writing portion is really, quite something. But I'm confident that he will be able to get to that soon. And once he does, he should be able to qualify for the express entry draws. To be fair, actually, our plan was okay. We were kind of like conservative about this. We just need you to get to CLB 5 so we can get you to a Francophone mobility work permit. And then when you have that work permit, you can basically have more runway because your PGWP is expiring so that you can improve your French some more and get to CLB 7. But lo and behold, he was able to do that. He was able to improve his French to CLB 7 in a matter of a year. And mind you, he worked full time. So he was taking classes twice a week with a lot of self-study, obviously, during the weekends. But yeah, what I'm saying is it's not impossible.
Amazing. And Lou, is this stream basically for like all the provinces, or is it just, maybe for Quebec since it's French speaking? What are insights on that?
The funny thing is, like, what we've been talking about thus far is actually federal, except for Quebec. So, in other words, it's everywhere in Canada that you can use these two programs that I've talked about, the Francophone category-based RAWs for express entry and the Francophone mobility work permit. Those are programs targeted for the rest of Canada outside of Quebec. For Quebec itself, you need to get to CLB 7 to 10, basically, in order to qualify for the Quebec skilled worker. They have their own immigration system there. We won't talk about it today, but certainly if your French is really strong, really fluent, you do have opportunities in Quebec to immigrate there, of course.
Interesting. Lou, thanks for clarifying. And again, if you want more details on this, I'll post a link in the description below where you can have a consultation with Lou and his team at LJD Law, just so you can be guided on, is this French francophone pathway for you or not? So click the link in the description below. Lou, let's move on to PNP, provincial nominee programs. What is the difference between the base PNP streams and enhanced PNP streams, like linked to Express Entry?
It's a good question. So actually, that's the first question that a lot of people ask me first and foremost. So as the name implies, the program itself is actually based out of the jurisdictional divides of Canada. So Canada is comprised of 10 provinces and 3 territories. So except for the province of Quebec, each of the jurisdictions from coast to coast to coast would run its own nomination program, whether they call it a territorial nomination program or a provincial nomination program. It will depend on where you're going, except for Quebec, as I mentioned. So you mentioned two distinctions, right? One is that is linked to express entry, and then another one that is not. So that's a very fair question because it is true that if you're in the express entry pool, it is possible that you could be invited to apply for nomination and get a certificate. So as people probably already know, if you're in the express entry pool, you're assigned a score, right? It's called the Comprehensive Ranking System score, the CRS score. Um, typically, if you are, in the pool already, and if you belong to an occupation that a certain province that you've targeted, for example, has a skills shortage in there, they will from time to time invite individuals in the pool to apply for nomination. So, say for example, Daniel, you're a candidate. You put yourself in the pool. Your score is, let's say, 450. But let's say you're working as let's say, as a data scientist. And let's say that the province of Ontario has a severe need for data scientists, right? And when you created your express entry profile, there is a question there, actually. Um, it asks you for consent if you want your information forwarded to whichever province in Canada for consideration under their express entry linked provincial nomination programs. So that's usually how it works. And when you click and select that and you consent to it, your information is automatically provided to the province of Ontario if you selected Ontario. And if Ontario deems that your skills are what they need to fill the gap, then you may receive a notification through your express entry profile. And what happens then is you go to the province of Ontario's provincial nomination program, you apply for their nomination certificate. Once you've met their requirements there, because that's separate from express entry, you get a certificate that says, we have approved you for nomination. Here's your nomination certificate, and we will update your express entry profile. Now it's backwards. The Ontario government will now forward the information back to the government of Canada, and you will receive an additional 600 points. So what were your points earlier? 450. So that puts you over the top. So you're now at 1,050 points. General draws in the last few months have been hovering at around 530 to 550. You have enough for about two people to get invitations, basically. Of course, it doesn't work like that, but you get the gist. Now, we've talked about the ones that are linked to express entry. We also have provincial nomination programs that are essentially standalone programs, but we can still subdivide those provincial nomination programs into expression of interest programs and direct entry programs. So the first one, the expression of interest program, they're like mini express entry programs. What they are is that you create a profile just like an express entry, you're assigned points, and then you're in a pool, and then you wait for an invitation to apply for nomination. This time, it's not an invitation to apply for PR, but rather to apply for nomination, right? So they do have a score-based system now, and you'll see these in the provinces of Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. Most provinces west of Quebec, they've implemented an expression of interest system largely driven by demand. So these are provinces that have high subscription rates. They're very much, popular target provinces. And basically, these provinces are trying to manage the incoming traffic. And one way to do that is by introducing their mini express entries called EOIs. And you get into the pool, you get the points, you get an invitation, and the rest of history is history. You get approved for the nomination. And once you have your nomination certificate, this doesn't add to your express entry points because you could do it without express entry. What happens is once you have that certificate at that point, you apply for PR directly to IRCC. That's it. So that's the EOI stream. The other stream is the direct entry system, which is where you basically have to meet the program requirements. So, for example, the province of Nova Scotia has the Nova Scotia Skilled Workers Program. It's a provincial nomination program that basically identifies, priorities for the province. So, for example, if you're a skilled worker meeting the minimum requirements such as language or education or the years of experience, they're generally not points-based systems. So if you qualify, you basically get to apply directly. And what it is it's a function of like not having heavy traffic incoming, that is, as opposed to the provinces in the West. And that the beauty of that is that as long as you qualify, you can submit an application and you just wait. And once you get the nomination certificate, then you can apply for PR. It used to be that Canada had this system for everything, including the federal skilled worker system, including the Canadian experience class. But because Canada's popularity increased over the decades, they had to introduce expression of interest systems. So we're starting to see that across the different PNPs as well. So far, the provinces flanking east of Quebec, so those would be the provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador. They have not yet introduced EOI systems. What they do is that, for example, in the province of Nova Scotia, I've seen them several times that do this already, is that they would put an announcement on their website as of May 15th of a certain year, for example, let's say 2024, they have stopped accepting applicants for the skilled worker program. So what we're seeing is a gradual increase in traffic even in the Atlantic provinces. So all this to say is that while they have not yet migrated to an EOI system where you're scored, you're ranked, just like an express entry, which is a code for it's getting competitive, out there in the East, they're starting to build that traffic. And at some point, it will not surprise me if these provinces migrate towards an expression of interest system, much like the federal government, much like Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. So that usually captures the three buckets I would call of express entry, of provincial nomination program. So there's express entry, there's expression of interest, and then there's standalone. And keep in mind that provinces like Ontario or the province of British Columbia, even, they may have PNP programs that are all of the above, meaning express entry, EOI, and direct entry. So it really depends. So, for example, in the province of British Columbia, they have the skills immigration. I forget what it stands for, but it's SIRS or SIRS. So it's their expression of interest. You get yourself in there if you qualify, you're assigned points, and you wait for an invitation. But then they have other programs such as their provincial health authority streams where it's also a direct entry. So what I'm saying is that you can have multiple of the three types of like provincial nomination programs. And of course, British Columbia participates in express entry as well. So you could, in theory, have an express entry profile, just click on BC, and then potentially you could get invited by virtue of the job that you're working. I
Hmm.
hope that was clear.
That
It's a
was
lot to process.
that actually excited me. That was a lot of new information for me. So if you're watching this video, rewatch that whole part. Like if you're stressing out about your current scenario, rewatch that whole part. See what your options are, and then of course consult with Lou to strategize on your next move. Okay? That was great. Lou, let's move on to the final phase. All right, we just talked about French, we talked about PNP. Let's talk about AIP, which is Atlantic Immigration Program. First
Yes.
question, what are the eligibility requirements for AIP?
So, the AIP, unlike the provincial nomination programs or express entry, the AIP is very much an employer or job offer driven program. So, if you're in the Atlantic region, or even if you're not in the Atlantic region, if you have a job offer from an employer in the Atlantic region, and the employer is included in a list of designated employers that can endorse a foreign national to permanent residence through the AIP, then you have a golden ticket because that employer simply needs to endorse you. You need to meet the minimum qualifications of the program. Uh, Apart from the endorsement, you need funds, settlement funds, and that varies depending on the size of your family. You also need to meet the minimum education requirements depending on the occupation or skill level that your job offers for. You need to meet the minimum, amount of time of having worked in the occupation in order to actually qualify for this program. And generally speaking, we're looking at a minimum of 1 year in a skill level within the last 3 years in order to qualify for this. And then, of course, there's language. Depending on your skill level, of course, the language requirements are going to, be set there. And it's actually on the website as well. Generally speaking, we're looking at a range of 5 to 7 in terms of the Canadian language benchmark. In addition, what else would be the requirements? You need a settlement plan. And what is a settlement plan? Because that's kind of unique to the AIP compared to express entry, for example, in most PNPs. The settlement plan is basically as the name implies, is a plan that allows you to integrate into the local community where you're immigrating to. And that settlement plan can't be just by you. It needs to be done by one of the partner local organizations in the municipality or the county where you're moving to in the Atlantic provinces. And the Atlantic provinces, by the way, are comprised of 4 provinces, and they are New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, if those for those readers, Anne of Green Gables, of course, and Newfoundland and Labrador. Right, the newest province in the Confederation of Canada, only having joined Canada in 1949. It used to be its own country. Um, Long story short here is that if you have those minimum qualifications, you could potentially qualify for the AIP. And what happens is the employer endorses you, and then you're able to apply for permanent residency directly. Of course, nothing is as simple as, what the papers or the theory, states. Of course, the logistics of it are a bit more complicated. For example, how do you find that job, right? So if you're outside Canada, that's kind of hard because there's a huge pool of temporary foreign workers or foreign nationals in Canada that are desperate to get permanent residence. And keep in mind, as of the previous levels plan, the Atlantic Immigration Program had a peak of 7,000 slots. So with the cuts, we can be sure that the numbers are going to decline. The program itself so far is not being put in the chopping board, for axing, for example, because the program is wildly successful. But at the same time, you can only give a certain slice of the cake to these different programs, right? So we'll see the numbers diminish. And what happens as a result, because there's not enough slots, is that a lot of people end up waiting to be endorsed. And what happens is while they're waiting, if they're already in Canada, they're eligible to apply for what's called a work permit, basically, that allows them to stay in Canada and work for that employer that endorsed them. And yeah, you basically wait, right? Now, a lot of international students, because I suspect you're going to ask this, a lot of international students actually are thinking of like moving to the Atlantic after they complete their studies to look at the AIP, and that is totally valid. But in my experience, what typically happens is that the employers are not so much hesitant, but they will take you because you can start work immediately, having with you a post-grad work permit. But what typically happens is that you're typically like not their priority to endorse for the AIP. So they usually like the good employers would prioritize the ones whose permits are about to expire, so to speak, right?
Mm.
Just like kind of like creating their own triage system to kind of like prioritize, oh, your status is running out, so I'm going to endorse you now. And then in the meantime, while we're still waiting, you're entitled to apply for an extension on the basis of the AIP. So there is how shall I put it, a partner or a twin program to the AIP, which allows you to apply for an extension for your work permit if you're already in Canada.
Mm. That's great. No, that was great information there. And since we're already talking about it, I'm sure a lot of viewers are gonna ask, what type of jobs are in high demand in Atlantic Canada for AIP applicants?
Funny that you should ask that because I was just on ChatGPT earlier and asked, the application to give us a quick list of high demand jobs out in the Atlantic. And what's showing on this list are software developers, cybersecurity analysts. No surprise for healthcare professionals, inclusive of family physicians, nurses, and allied healthcare workers, for example. Skilled trades construction, because we know that there's a construction, crunch in Canada. Carpenters, for example, are in very high demand. There's also truck drivers, no surprise there as well. This is a large company. We need to truck a large country. There's a lot of there's a lot of land to truck over, right? Then, of course, because we're in the Atlantic, one of their critical industries is the fisheries sector. So people are looking for marine biologists, people even who are like on the lower skill end of the totem pole, such as those who pack fish. They're still in high demand in manufacturing centers out in the Atlantic provinces because someone's got to put those fishies in the cans, right?
No, that's great. So yeah, we'll link more information in the description below. And again, guys, if you're watching this video, if you're excited about these streams, I highly recommend that you consult with Lou and his team at LJD Law. We partnered with them for this video. Click the link in the description below. There's going to be a consultation link there where you can get $100 off your first consultation. And Lou, I'll pass it on to you. What can they expect in these consultations? Yeah, and how
Yeah,
can they expect to work with you?
absolutely. So if you're looking for your pathway to permanent residence, a consultation is the first best start because we get to assess your factors and we go down to the individualized level. Because while we talked about, these programs writ large, and as you can see, there's like a lot of programs out there. Ultimately, your success is determined by your factors and what programs are out there. And it's not what shall we say, a one size fits all approach anymore, unfortunately. So it's not that easy. What we do in our practice is we assist people to find the correct pathway. So the consultation is the first best start. And then if you want us to pursue it further, typically what we do is our clients engage us to build a roadmap, a personalized roadmap to find which programs across the whole country of Canada, which program is actually best suited for you to secure your permanent residency. So, for example, in the past, we've had clients who were in the province of Ontario, who basically had very little chance under express entry or through the provincial nomination programs, who are now waiting for their PR application to turn around because they found their nomination in the province of British Columbia. So beyond that, we don't, create a singular roadmap. What we do is we create a robust plan that has backup plans. Because in the context of constant policy changes, the constant craziness of the immigration industry right now, what you need is a backup plan, and what your backup plan needs is a backup plan. So that's what we specialize in, and we are looking forward to help you, whether it's going to be in English, in French, or in Tagalog.
Fantastic, Lou. Thank you so much. And again, we've worked with Lou for numerous years now. He helped Bea and I become permanent residents in under 2 years, and now officially Canadian citizens. We couldn't have done that without Lou's help. So don't look further, guys. I mean, you can still search online. There we go. See that flag. I mean, you can still search online, best immigration lawyer in Canada. I mean, don't look further. We trust Lou, our friends trust him, and he's gonna help you reach your goals. All right. Lou, we'll wrap there. This was a great conversation, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you for this opportunity, Daniel. Take care.
Thanks, Lou. Bye.